Here at Beyond the Margins, we sometimes have guests with difficult stories. On this episode, we will be speaking to two childhood sexual abuse survivors. Although they do not discuss any of the acts that were perpetrated on them, we want you to consider your well-being as you decide whether or not you want to watch the show. If you are concerned this may be a trigger for you, please continue with caution. Your personal well-being is our priority, and also should be yours. Welcome to Beyond the Measures. I'm your host, Jason, and with me today I have John and Deb. They are both childhood sex abuse survivors who have become activists in the most amazing way. And joining us in this episode is Veronica. Veronica is a licensed counselor. She's going to be available for us so that she can share any resources that any of our listeners may need after being a part of the show. I just want to share what I know about John and Deb. John, I know that your family responded in the most amazing way when you finally were able to tell them what was going on. And every time I even talk about it, it chokes me up a little bit because it was a terrible situation, but such the right response. And we hear that so rarely. And Deb, I know that I know less about you because we have not had a chance to talk as often as John and I have. We've texted and spoken once before. But Deb, I do know that you are a activist in the community. I know that you want to push so that more people know what to do and how to recognize the signs. And that drew me in big time when I was reading about that, because as a teacher, I look for things. I've been taught to look for things, but I never considered that the general public probably should be educated on that as well. So I feel we're very blessed to have you here. We are going to step back. I want you two to share your story as you feel comfortable. And when you are done, we will join back in with you and share any questions that we have.
Okay. So my name's Deb Aldrick. I'm from Australia, and my advocacy journey started last year when I decided that I'd had basically a gut full of seeing a lot of abuse. I had my own abuse as a child, and I'd just seen so many friends or an extended family member who had been through similar stuff. And so I decided that, that I wanted to help people. As Jason said, I'm very big on educating the general public to see signs of adult survivors' behaviors that aren't, great. And I wrote my story on Braveheart's website to start my journey, and then I started writing my own book, and now I do speaking events and any social media I can possibly get the word out on. And my story began down in New South Wales, Sydney, Northern Beaches. I grew up there till I was 14 years old, and then we moved into state. And my abuse was intrafamilial, and it started when I was about 4 or 5 years old, before I started school, and went on till I was about 14 years old. And having it being a close family member to me, I didn't have a way out. And then when I did speak to the person who in my book I call my supposed protector, because they were supposed to protect me, but they didn't, I was about 10 years old and told this person that a family member was hurting me. And besides them yelling at this person one night when they caught them in my room, nothing else was done. There was no follow-up at all with me to see if it had stopped. And then as I grew older and tried to speak to this adult again, they didn't want to know about it because it was too hard to deal with, being the close relationship they had to my abuser. So they just kind of subtly silenced me. And almost every decade I tried to speak up again to this adult person in my life, and once again, just a lot of manipulation to keep me quiet. I had low self-esteem to start with, so I didn't really know how to deal with it. And I had to take myself to psychologists from the age of 20. Was a single mum at the age of 19. And I now look back after I've done all this healing through my own writing and everything. And a lot of pieces have been put into place with exactly how much control and manipulation and silencing went on for me. And I just decided I didn't want that for myself anymore, but also for everyone else. And there's thousands upon thousands of people out there who have been abused in the family situations, and they're all in the same situation and position that I was in, particularly the ones who haven't found their voices yet and are still continuing to be manipulated by their family to keep quiet for the sake of appearances in their family. So that is my aim and my journey. Moving on is to help other people, and I explain all the repercussions and everything through my book and my website and my social media. And I think that's about it. Just get started.
Thank you, Deb. And I must say I have read Deb's book, and it's an amazing book and easy to read. So I know it's such a difficult topic. So that's really, I think that's as a fellow someone that's been abused before, that was a really helpful book and would highly recommend. Thanks, Deb. My name's John, and I am from Melbourne, which is south of where Deb is from, where it's really cold at the moment, unfortunately. And yes, I'm also been through childhood sexual abuse. When I was 6 years old, I was within the family unit, and it started when I was around 6 years old, and continued for a few years. And in that time, it was a bit of a struggle, bit of a challenge. But I think, like Deb, trying to get the message out there on a whole range of things. But for me, while that abuse was happening, you wouldn't know, because I was still a happy-go-lucky, sporty little brat in a little bit, cheeky little boy. But and that was the most difficult part. But I guess later on we might talk about the changing and challenging behaviours that might come up when these things happen, especially for children and young teenagers. But I think the most challenging part for me, at being so young at the time, and my parents being come over from Italy, and no education on protective behaviours, or seeing the signs of early abuse or abuse, and through that time I was communicating what was happening, but I was just in a different way. So I was starting to act out and be physically aggressive, and in school, and just acting up, and so that was a changing behaviour. So I guess a bit like Deb, we're on the same road, and in terms of trying to educate the community what those signs are, and that it's every adult's responsibility to know what those signs are, and that can be hard if it doesn't come naturally to you, but I think it's up to us, especially as survivors. We're not psychologists, but we absolutely have lived experience, and we exactly know what it feels like to go through some horrendous experiences. And so we know exactly what needs to happen, particularly for children and young teenagers. We know adults go through absolutely trauma and horrific experiences. And as Deb was saying, it's really prevalent, and I'm not sure what the statistics are in the United States, but in Australia, and correct me if I'm wrong, Deb, I think it's 1 in 4 children that have been exposed or had the experience of being sexually abused, raped, and I don't say that lightly, or sexual assaulted. And there was another statistic again in Australia, that 1 in 5 adults, that they don't know how to see the signs or what the signs are, which I find quite concerning. In my brain, and I'm sure in Deb's brain, it's quite a common sense, but then I have to think, well, we've got lived experience, so we would know what to look for. So it's up to us to make sure we get out there and walk to walk and talk to talk, so to speak. But as you're saying, Jason, I was very lucky that after 2 years of trying to communicate my abuse, I was able to tell my mum. And luckily for me, she had no education on how to act protectively, but she believed me right away. And to this day, I believe it's been my biggest healer. And I truly believe when children or anyone, adults, disclose something so horrific, I think that the biggest thing for the listener is to believe and validate and acknowledge what's happened, because from my understanding and my learning is if they're not believed or if they're questioned, that could also add to the trauma and prolong any healing. So, yeah, going back to my mum, yeah, I'm super lucky. And unfortunately, I keep hearing it's uncommon, which as a parent myself, I would, I've got to be careful with what I say with your terms and conditions, Jason, but I would act very protectively, hopefully in the right manner. But, I certainly would be in a rage, to be honest with you. But I was lucky my mum called the police and went through all the systems that it needed to, and the abuser was convicted. Not that that helps or anything like that, but at least some sort of justice was prevailed, if you like. And I don't want to speak for Deb, but just quickly to finish off, the younger a person's abused, the more likely that person in adulthood is going to have depression, anxiety, lots of different trauma responses, lots of trigger events, and that can really impact the health and well-being of people. So that needs to be acknowledged, I think. So, yeah, we've all got it doesn't mean that just because we've been through a traumatic experience, we're not entitled to anything better or less, but I think it's really important that our voices are heard and listened to, and hopefully that can make a really big impact.
John, Deb, thank you so much. Your story that you're sharing is so powerful, so important. And I don't know right now. I'm going to have to look because it's important to know this kind of statistic. I don't know what the statistics in America are right now. I do know they want what's right for the kids. They want what's best for the kids, but I don't know why. Maybe you have a perspective on this. I don't know why they brush these things aside and the kids come to me and I will take it to them because they will do something when I take it to them. But why are adults who clearly love these children, why are they afraid to accept what they're being told?
From my experience, Jason, particularly if it's intrafamilial childhood sexual abuse, which is the abuse that happens within the family, it's too hard for them to deal with. They're too close to the perpetrator, and they don't have the education. They don't realize if it hasn't happened to them, and even if it has happened to them, sometimes they don't act. But they don't realize this is a lifelong sentence. This doesn't just finish when your abuse finishes. You will take up behaviors to deal with something that you can't deal with internally, whether that's writing yourself off down the pub every weekend, people pleasing, anger, domestic violence. There's so many roads that we can all go down because of what happened to us. But parents, this is what John and I, are obviously trying to help with. You can't brush it under the rug. It doesn't go away. And the least you do for that child, the more they're going to internalize that to think that there was something that they did wrong. They'll be feeling guilt and shame. But sorry, I'm going a little bit off track there, but
no, it's okay.
Parents don't know what to do. And, there's that old saying, they're just, if it's child on child abuse, it's just doctors and nurses, or they're just, investigating their bodies or whatever it is. And there could be a tiny bit of that at the start, but then once it becomes control and abuse and manipulation, then that's when it goes from that exploratory stage of, what's going on. And as we were talking about statistics before, it really doesn't matter what statistics are in America or Australia because they're all wrong. because no one got my statistics because it was covered up. And the family stuff is the most prevalent, as John was saying. So we would have no idea what the true statistics were because most people don't speak.
You're right, Deb. Thank you. That's an excellent point, and I appreciate that. Thank you. John, I know that you have several, I don't want to call them systems in a way that it belittles it, but to be honest with you, I'm not good at remembering what we call them, but you have Be Calmer. And I know that each letter has a meaning behind it. And I know there's a name for that, but I can never remember what it is. Would you share a little bit of that with us?
Yeah. And Deb, just quickly, just before that, Deb is absolutely right, because that statistic of 1 in 4 wouldn't be, I guess it's gives us a little bit of a story, but there's so many that haven't been reported for different reasons, as Deb said. But one statistic I think is helpful to know and really important. So I'm not sure in America about stranger danger. It's kind of like not old school now, but it's still a little bit. But 90% of sexual abuse cases are done by someone known to the child. So, I think the old stranger danger is something that we need to flip to strange behaviors, because some strangers are the most caring and kind-hearted people. We're all strangers here, and we're all safe adults. So I think, that statistic is really important for people to know, because some of our family members are the most dangerous people, and that's really hard to hear. I think that would be a more relevant statistic, and I think they've made a great point about the 1 in 4, but that 90%, even if it was 80 or 70%, that's horrific. So anyway, I just wanted to put that out there. I don't know if that's a worldwide, I'm pretty sure that's an Australian statistic, but so why I'm so passionate about, I had a really great, I was going to say great experience. I'm not sure if it's the right term to use, but in terms of my mum believing me, and I know that, again, that's been my biggest healer. And that's why I developed a framework called Be Calmer. Even though I believe it's a really common sense kind of approach, and it's no different here, Jason, that there's a lot of adults would not know how to respond. And that's really concerning. And Deb mentioned, education. And I think as when I say older generation, I think the children that we educate today and the younger adults, we're becoming a bit more aware and open and understanding, which is great. But I think it comes back to education. And yes, I developed that framework called Be Calmer, and it's just for a simple process for people to know what to do in the moment if there is a disclosure, because I'm really passionate about that. As an adult, we need to respond in a way that's effective and in a calm manner, because as an adult, if we're panicking and flapping around and showing the child or another adult that we're panicking, that they may never disclose or want to talk about that again. So being calm and making sure that we believe, validate, and acknowledge. I won't go through each letter, but that's what it includes. And why I'm so passionate is because I'm not sure what road I would have taken. I've never gone down any addictions, and I truly believe that my mum believed in me, not blinking the wrong way, not questioning me, not saying, "Oh, were they just playing?" or maybe there was an accident. And this was an adult, mind you, at the time. So, and I reflect back on it. There's a few other things that have helped me heal, but that has been my biggest healer, and that's why I've developed that framework called Be Calmer, because I feel that's, I think all educators, every organisation, it's not just for children, but it's for adults, because there's lots of adults disclosing, and there's so many adults in the workplace that are going through trauma, and they don't feel comfortable disclosing, because if we all knew that someone would respond in a manner that would be effective, calm, I think there would be a lot more help and support. But so that's what I've developed, and hopefully that can be helpful for people.
Well, John, I know I'll speak for everybody. We are all grateful for your mother's response because she was, in a time just like now when that's not usually the response. And in a time when you said, she didn't have any education on how to deal with that, it would have been very easy for her to do what everybody else does and just go, oh, you must be mistaken. So we are very grateful for her being an example to what will hopefully become a worldwide audience. In fact, we may have to uh, put her name at the beginning of the episode, so I'll get that from you later. Deb, John had mentioned the book that you wrote, and I'll be honest, I have not had a chance to read it. You and I only really connected a week or so ago, but I really want you to tell me about it because, if it affected John that way, I think other people need to read it too. So if you would share what it's about, where we can find it, that would be amazing.
Thanks, Jason. Yeah, it's called Circling the Wagons, and I came up with that name, and because, as I said, this isn't new to me. Like, writing and talking about this is new, but I've seen this throughout my whole life. I've known friends, my own experience, other family, that sort of stuff. But what I couldn't work out is why these abusers, perpetrators, pedophiles, whatever you want to call them, kept getting away with it in the family. And then I came to realize it's because the family is hiding the secret. And in turn, they're hiding the perpetrators and letting them get away with it. And that's why I came up with the name Circling the Wagons, because everyone's circling around this secret and they're getting protected due to the secret being so shameful. And then people like myself and John, or, anyone who's been abused, we're on the outside under it. That's why I came up with the name. And it just fit as a metaphor so well. And it took me a long time. I'd started writing the book before I even found the name. But once I found that, I went, this is perfect. But the book is basically, it's probably a very unorthodox book. John may be able to agree, but I don't think there's very many books out there like mine. And I was told at the start, look, go research, go read other people's books. And I said, no, I don't want to do that. I want this to be my original work. And so I've got poems throughout it, which, I didn't know I could write anything, let alone a poem, before I started writing. But it's just a kind of a gentle guide through for survivors, but also their family and friends to understand a bit more about what we all go through. And that's how I wanted to, just show people through my own examples, through things that I'd seen without giving away details of other people. But just, even family trees, I've got a family tree in there it's just all colours. I don't use people's names. It's a hypothetical family tree of how generational abuse can be allowed to continue.
Yeah.
And one of the things I always kind of say to people, I prefer them to, if you're a survivor, I prefer you to buy my paperback because at the end of it, I've got blank line pages. And one of the reasons I did that is because when I would try and verbalize what happened to my supposed protector, they'd have really ignorant responses. And then we'd get into an argument and then nothing would ever get, worked through. So the reason I did that at the back was if any survivor reads my book and they have the same struggles that I do, they can write their story at the end. And once that person that they need to give it to reads mine and understands a bit more of what everyone goes through, then hopefully by the time they get to the end, they can read their family members' journey and have a bit more empathy and do the right thing. But as I said, it's unorthodox. It's survivor to survivor. It's not, I finished school at the end of grade 10 because I felt dumb. I felt like I wasn't good enough as a person worthwhile. So, it's not a textbook sort of thing. But I think a lot of people can relate to examples and the fact that I haven't written it as an expert, but more of as lived experience. Yeah.
I don't see a difference, to be honest with you. I think that lived experience far outweighs book learning, and I am a well-educated book learner, and I'll still tell you that lived experience far outweighs what I learned in books. But books that are written by people with lived experience, that I don't know that I've really ever delved into that. So, Deb, I'm going to have to order your book, I guess. Where can I find it?
So it is available worldwide. I self-published through Ingram Sparks, which is a platform that sells to Amazon, Utopia, Barnes and Noble.
Great.
You know, pretty much if you just Google my name and Circling the Wagons, it will come up somewhere that it can be bought. And it's either an ebook or a paperback that I've published it in.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. I mean, your work, your book, John, you guys are amazing. I'm so grateful you're here. I want to get Veronica in here just for a second. Veronica, thank you for being patient. Thank you for being with us today. Veronica, from a U.S. standpoint, because, well, actually, I'm kind of hoping that my Australia fanship takes off now, but from an American U.S. standpoint, if somebody is experiencing what they think may be a child who's being abused, could you give us advice or resources on what good first steps to take are for them?
And just to be clear, so you're saying like if a child comes to you and is reporting sexual assaults, is that what you're saying? Or
Yeah. I mean, obviously, like John and Deb had said, you want to believe them. You want to, affirm what they're saying and check on their safety. But outside of school, I know what to do because I can report it to the state immediately. But outside of a school, what does somebody in the general public do if they hear that or they suspect abuse?
yeah, so I mean, it would be contacting, obviously, if it's not the parent abusing, if checking to see is it the parent that's abusing or is it not? And if it, calling the authorities as well and getting them letting them know about what you think is happening, as well as also contacting the social worker in the area as well to help.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. What about with adult survivors who haven't reported yet? That's another one that I don't know that we even address that usually, but I'm sitting here looking at John and Deb and I'm thinking, what if it had been different for them? What if they were at this age and hadn't reported it, but it was getting to the point where it was making things even worse than it had been all this time and they needed to do something? And I know we can tell them, go to a psychologist, go to a counselor, but where do they start looking? How do they find the right one? What kind of resource can they go to find somebody that can help them?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think a great resource, and I think it's really as well as Psychology Today. Psychology Today is a great way of finding a therapist. And then you can go through, and there's a lot, and they can say their specialty. So there's some of them say like child abuse or childhood trauma or complex trauma. And then that way you're able to really see which therapist, and it tells you if they take insurance and their fees and all of that. So you're able to really pick the therapist that you feel is the best fit for you.
Well, really, I had no idea. That's really very interesting. But I'm going to wrap things up for today. John and Deb and Veronica, I want to take this opportunity to thank you all. You made this show better than it ever could have been without you. I also want to ask if I could possibly bend your ear more often. I would like to include you guys in a regular recording of a show where you can share more of your story and the activism you're doing. And Veronica, if you can, anytime you have the link, please come back. I want you here too, because some of the stuff we do like this is so heavy. And I want to make sure that our viewers and listeners have somebody that can shout out resources like you did today, that Psychology Today. I didn't even know that was a thing. That's so amazing. I learned that today, and I will add a link for that into the show description as well.
Yeah.
John and Deb, could I possibly ask you to become return guests so that we could have more discussions about this?
Yeah, I'd love to. Thanks, Jess.
Yeah, not a problem.
That would be great. We will work out the schedule. I will stay in touch with y'all and make sure that we work out a good schedule for all of us. So from Beyond the Measures, I want to say thank you from John and Deb and Veronica, and of course, your host, Jason. We will always be here for you. We always want to bring the information that makes our lives better, the information that brings us closer and brings us into unity. We're sorry, and we'll do better next time. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye.